All right, it looks like everyone is here. We can go ahead and get started. Amanda, if you would please begin the recording. Good morning, everyone. Today is August 12th, 2021. The time is approximately 10:12 a.m. My name is Amber, and I am the chair of today's Equity Resolution Hearing Panel. This hearing is being conducted over Zoom, so I first want to ensure everyone is able to see and hear clearly before we continue. We will do brief introductions where I will call on each person to state their name and role at today's hearing. I will also confirm that each of you is able to see and hear clearly. I will start with my fellow panelists, Liz.
My name is Liz Zufall, and I'm a hearing panelist.
And can you see and hear clearly?
I can, thank you.
Great, thank you. Lisa. Oh, Lisa, can you unmute, please?
My name is Lisa Taylor. I'm a hearing panelist.
Thank you. And can you see and hear clearly as well?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Next with the parties, Claire.
My name is Claire Winters and I'm the complainant.
And Julia.
And my name is Julia Stensby, and I'm the complainant's advisor.
Okay, and Claire and Julia, can you both see and hear clearly?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Mike.
My name is Mike Stein. I am the respondent.
And do you prefer to go by Michael or Mike?
Mike is fine. Thank you.
Okay, just to confirm, thank you. Mindy.
My name is Mindy Wurgis, and I am the respondent's advisor.
Okay, Mike and Mindy, can you both see and hear clearly?
Yes,
I can. Yep.
All right, thank you. And finally, Amanda.
My name is Amanda Harden, and I am the investigator in this matter.
And can you see and hear clearly?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, we'll start next with an overview of the hearing and go over the ground rules. As the hearing panel chair, my role is to oversee this hearing. The hearing is part of the university's equity resolution process as set forth in section 600.040 of the collected rules and regulations, utilized to determine whether a student has violated university policy. The audio of this hearing is being recorded. To assist with the recording, I request that everyone speak clearly, respond verbally to questions, and please refrain from speaking over others. To assist in an orderly process, all participants will remain muted unless it is their turn to speak. We will pause the recording during breaks and then start it again when we resume after the break, and each time I will announce the time for the record. And Amanda, as the investigator, will be running the recording. So you'll hear me direct her to start and stop as we go. The panel members will do our best to accomplish 3 goals here today. Our role is to apply the university's rules for equity resolution hearings, doing the best we can to help everyone here understand and follow those rules. Second, consistent with those rules, we want to give both the complainant and the respondent a full and fair opportunity to be heard while allowing both of them to tell their stories and to present evidence if they choose to do so. I would like to remind all participants that the respondent is presumed not responsible for any violations of university policy. Only after today's proceedings have concluded will the hearing panel make a finding that the respondent is either responsible or not responsible. Finally, we intend to ensure that everyone here, whether a party to the case, a witness, or anyone else present, is treated with courtesy and respect. I ask that everyone be patient and respectful during the hearing. We ask that you are honest and abide by the university's key values of respect, discovery, excellence, and responsibility. The information collected during the hearing will help the panel decide whether Mike Stein is responsible for violating university policy, and if so, to determine appropriate sanctions. I will next talk about some technical considerations for this hearing. If at any point during the hearing you are unable to see or hear clearly, or if you experience other technology-related issues, please raise your hand or send a message to me using the Zoom chat feature. If you are unable to get my attention, if I don't see you, I want my fellow panelists to help me monitor as we go, to alert me if anyone is trying to get my attention and I don't notice. But you can also unmute yourself and speak if we haven't seen you. I just want to make sure everyone is heard. Because of various factors, such as internet connection speeds, we may have to pause to troubleshoot or ask that you repeat your question or answer. Please note that we will only do this if necessary, and it is to only ensure that everyone can hear what is being said. We appreciate your patience and understanding should this occur. Privacy expectations. The university takes privacy seriously and expects the same level of privacy to occur over Zoom as it would in an in-person hearing. You previously received this information via email and a document entitled Preparing for a Zoom Hearing, but I want to reiterate expectations now. As I mentioned earlier, audio of today's hearing is being recorded, and the Office for Civil Rights in Title IX will maintain this recording as the sole and official record. Using any device to record audio and/or video, or use any device to take photos or screenshots is prohibited. The only people permitted to attend the hearing are the parties. We have one witness today who will join us later, the panelists, the investigator, and known advisors who have already introduced themselves. Everyone participating over Zoom should take all reasonable measures to ensure no one else is in the room or can see or hear the proceedings. If I become aware that a non-participating party is watching or listening to the proceedings, I will pause the hearing until the person is no longer watching or listening. On your end, if someone interrupts, if you need to ask for a break, that's totally fine. Unexpected things may come up. Just let us know. Participants who do not abide by these guidelines may either be warned or dismissed from the proceedings at the discretion of me, the chair. If an unforeseeable interruption does occur, just as a reminder, raise your hand, let us know. We can pause the hearing at that time and then reconvene when we're ready. Okay. I want to go through the list and make sure everyone has a good understanding of these rules. Feel free to ask any questions that you have. Claire, do you agree to abide by these rules or have any questions?
I agree, and I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Julia?
I agree, and I don't have any questions either.
Okay. Mike?
I agree, and I have no questions.
And Mindy?
I agree and have no questions.
Okay, thank you, everyone. The next section will talk about the role of advisors at today's hearing. I want to review for the record the role of the parties' advisors in this hearing. The advisor's role is limited to supporting the individual who is participating in the process. An advisor may not question witnesses or make statements directly to the hearing panel. During the hearing, the advisor may consult with their advisee using a previously established means of communication. So if you've had those conversations previously, whether you're going to text each other, send emails, call during breaks, whatever works for you. And during those breaks, you can also consult. During the breaks, you're able to talk with your advisor. We'll put folks in breakout rooms. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but those won't be recorded, so you'll have that privacy as well. During the breaks, they won't be recorded, as I mentioned. You'll be in a designated breakout room. Those allow for participants to communicate away from each other. The advisors who do not abide by these guidelines, so when we're all in the hearing room together, you will either be warned or dismissed from the proceedings at the discretion of the panel. If warned, a second violation will result in dismissal of the advisor from the proceeding. Because advisors are not active participants in the hearing, they are not required to be on video, so you may turn off your camera if you wish to do so. However, all of the same privacy expectations will remain. So I hope that all makes sense. Julia, do you acknowledge those ground rules?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. And do you have any questions about them at this time?
No.
Okay. Mindy, do you acknowledge these ground rules?
I do.
And do you have any questions?
No questions.
to note, I do realize that it can be difficult for an advisor to consult with their advisee while the hearing is going on, yet those consultations may be necessary. If at any point you wish to pause for a moment to talk with your advisee, please let us know, have the party speak up and ask for a break. That's totally fine. I will request that the recording be paused each time, and we'll go into the breakout rooms for you to privately consult. When you're ready to resume the hearing, you can send me a message using the Zoom chat feature, and I will bring everyone back into the main hearing room. Next, we will talk about questions and requesting breaks in a bit more detail. If a party is unsure or confused at any point during the hearing, please raise your hand and I will answer your question as soon as possible without disrupting the hearing. Parties and their advisors are encouraged to request breaks if needed in order to engage in self-care or to speak privately, as we've talked about. Panelists will occasionally request our own breaks if we need to discuss aspects of the case. So we may call for those breaks on our own. Whenever a break occurs, we'll send folks to the breakout rooms and pause the recording. I'll make every effort to ensure that the hearing ends at a reasonable time today, with all of that being considered. The complainant, respondent, and witnesses, today's witness, there's one of them, are not required to respond to any questions they do not wish to answer. The hearing will continue regardless of whether you answer. The hearing panel will make a decision based on the investigative report and exhibits, as well as information provided during this hearing. Are there any questions before we proceed? Seeing none. Opportunities to object to hearing panel members is the next section. I'm going to cover some preliminary matters for the hearing and read kind of each aspect out loud. So we'll go over some of the things that have been communicated to you before the hearing. We'll read those into the record, including you have the opportunity to object to members of the hearing panel. Any objections to a hearing panelist were required to be submitted in writing 15 business days prior to today's hearing. All of those objections have, if they occurred, have been sufficiently dealt with, and we are here with today's panel. Any further questions or objections about the panelists at this time, please speak up. Okay. Seeing no questions. Thank you all. Rules regarding questioning and evidence. I want to remind you of the ground rules regarding questioning and evidence. Certain topics are not allowed to be part of the hearing. You may not ask questions or offer statements or documents about the following three things. One, the character of the complainant or respondent, unless that's deemed relevant by the hearing panel. Two, incidents not directly related to the possible violation unless they show a pattern of behavior. And three, the sexual history of the complainant, though our rules do allow for a limited exception in regard to sexual history between the parties for cases in which such a history exists. So that will apply here in today's hearing. Claire and Mike, you may not directly question each other. The questions for each of you must go through me as the hearing panel chair. At the relevant parts of the hearing, I will give you time to write down and/or type questions and submit them to me. If I decide your questions are appropriate and relevant after consulting with the other panelists, I will ask them on your behalf. Claire, do you agree that questions to the respondent must go through me?
I agree.
Thank you. Mike, do you agree that questions to the complainant must go through me?
Yes.
Thank you. Format of today's hearing will go as follows. We will first review the record, including the allegations, the documents, and list of witnesses. After we review the record, we will hear from witnesses, first being Amanda as an investigator, followed by the complainant, Claire, and then the respondent, Mike. We will then hear from any other proposed witnesses, and today I believe we will be joined by one witness, Nikki McKnight. Finally, there will be an opportunity for the investigator, complainant, and respondent to make closing remarks. At this point, are there any questions? Please raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, seeing none. Review of the allegations and university policies at issue. Mike, we are here to determine whether you violated university anti-discrimination policies, specifically section 600.010 of the collected rules and regulations, which is the equal employment and educational opportunity and non-discrimination policy. As stated in the investigative report, you are alleged to have violated the following. And I will read the definition of sexual assault from university policy. It is defined as any sexual act that constitutes rape, sodomy, sexual assault with an object, fondling, incest, and statutory rape as defined below. Rape specifically is the carnal knowledge of a person without the consent of the victim, including instances where the victim is incapable of giving consent because of their age or because of their temporary or permanent mental or physical incapacity. There is, quote, carnal knowledge if there is the slightest penetration of the vagina or penis by the sex organ of the other person. Attempted rape is also included. A couple more definitions from the policy that will be relevant here today would be consent to sexual activity, which is defined as knowing and voluntary. Consent to sexual activity requires all involved persons to consent to sexual activity requires of all involved persons a conscious and voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity. Each person engaged in sexual activity must have met the legal age of consent. It is the responsibility of each person to ensure that they have the consent of all others engaged in the sexual activity. Consent must be obtained at the time of the specific activity and can be withdrawn at any time. Consent, lack of consent, or withdrawal of consent may be communicated by words or nonverbal acts. Someone who is incapacitated cannot consent. Silence or absence of resistance does not establish consent. The existence of a dating relationship or past sexual relations between the parties involved should never by itself be assumed to be an indicator of consent. Further, consent to one form of sexual activity does not imply consent to other forms of sexual activity. Consent to engage in sexual activity with one person does not imply consent to engage in sexual activity with another. Coercion or force or threats of either invalidates consent. Also, I will read the definition of incapacitated or incapacitation from university policy, which is a state in which rational decision-making or the ability to consent is rendered impossible because of a person's temporary or permanent physical or mental impairment, including but not limited to physical or mental impairment resulting from drugs or alcohol, disability, sleep, unconsciousness, or illness. Consent does not exist when the respondent knew or should have known of the other individual's incapacitation. Incapacitation is determined based on the totality of the circumstances. Incapacitation is more than intoxication, but intoxication can cause incapacitation. Factors to consider in determining incapacity include, but are not limited to, the following. A lack of awareness of circumstances or surroundings. For example, an inability to understand, either temporarily or permanently, the who, what, where, how, and or why of the circumstances, such as a blackout state. B, inability to physically or verbally communicate coherently, particularly with regard to consent. For example, slurred or incoherent speech. C, lack of control over physical movements. For example, difficulty walking or standing without stumbling or assistance. D, physical symptoms. For example, vomiting or incontinence. Next will be the review of the record. We are going to review the documents that relate to today's hearing and the equity resolution process. These documents are part of the record. First, the notice of hearing, which was sent on July 12th, 2021. I will ask each of you to acknowledge that you received the notice of hearing. Mike, did you receive the notice?
Mhm.
Mike, can you please provide a verbal response? Just a reminder.
I'm sorry. Yes, I received the notice.
Thank you. Claire, did you receive the notice?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. Amanda, do you have any additional evidence or comments to make at this time as the investigator?
No, I do not.
Okay. Proposed witnesses identified by the complainant, respondent, or investigator. We'll discuss that next. I received a request for the following witness to appear at the hearing today, Nikki McKnight. For the record, I will ask the parties to acknowledge that they received the name of this proposed witness prior to today's hearing. Mike,
I did.
Claire,
Yes, I did.
thank you both. And the investigator, Amanda, do you have any comments at this time?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Got it. Next, the investigative report and exhibits. The parties received access to the investigative report and accompanying exhibits on July 12th, 2021, the same day as the notice of hearing. Please acknowledge that you received these documents prior to the hearing. Mike,
I received the documents. Yes.
thank you. Claire,
Yes, I received the documents.
thank you. Any comments from the investigator, Amanda?
No comments. Thank you.
Do the parties have any objections to the investigative report and exhibits before we continue? Seeing none. Thank you. No objections. Additional documents. Claire, do you have any additional documents that you would like the hearing panel to consider in making its decision?
No, I don't.
Mike, do you have any additional documents that you would like the hearing panel to consider in making its determination?
I do not.
Okay, thank you both. Are there any other matters or questions that need to be addressed by the hearing panel before we proceed? And or does anyone need a break before we continue? Seeing no such requests, thank you all. We will now hear from the parties and any witnesses to the case. We ask that you answer truthfully and abide by the University of Missouri's principles as we discussed earlier. Just a reminder on that point. Another reminder in terms of the order that we will go in. It will be the complainant first to make a statement and then questions, and then the respondent to make a statement and questions. Before we get to the parties, I do want to real quick make sure that we also give the investigator a chance to speak. Amanda was the investigator in this case. Do you have a statement that you would like to make before we are able to ask any questions? We'll start with Amanda. Do you have a statement?
No, I do not have any additional statement. I conducted the investigation and the investigative report has my information.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Amanda as the investigator from the hearing panel? Liz or Lisa, do you have any questions for Amanda? Okay, seeing none. I don't have any questions at this time for Amanda either. So we will ask the complainant. Claire, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions for Amanda.
Okay. Mike, do you have any questions for Amanda, the investigator?
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right. Now the parties. Claire, you will be given the opportunity to make a statement. Then the hearing panel and investigator can ask questions, if any. followed by written questions by the respondent that I will ask. There will be a break after the hearing panel asks our questions so that the respondent can make a list of questions to submit to the panel. Any questions before we move into that part of the hearing? Okay. Claire, are you ready to make your statement if you would like to do so?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
First, I want to thank you all for being here today to hear this very important matter. It's shocking to wake up and have almost no memory of what happened to you the night before. It's even worse to realize then that someone you thought was your friend and somebody you could trust had sex with you when you were too intoxicated to remember it and too intoxicated to consent to having sex. The respondent told me that what happened that night is the same thing that always happened when we got together, but that's just not true because I don't really remember what happened. I may have hooked up with the respondent before, but those times were different. I have memories of what happened then, even though I'd been drinking. On this night, the incident, I was not just drunk, it was more than that. I don't remember spilling my drink that night. I don't remember how I got upstairs. I don't remember how any of my clothing was removed. In fact, one of the few things I do remember is a brief moment when the respondent was touching my breast, and I remember feeling like I wanted to push him away, but I couldn't. I woke up the next morning confused about what had happened and being freaked out when I saw a used condom in the trash. I've spent a lot of time since this incident desperately trying to remember what happened, but I don't recall the details of this night. It's clear to me that I was too intoxicated to consent to sexual activity that night.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Next would be questions by the hearing panel, and I would actually like to take a break to briefly convene with my panelists to go over our questions, and then we will come back. So Amanda, if you could go ahead and pause the recording. For the record, the time is 10:43 a.m. We are back on the record at 10:45 a.m. We are ready for questions from the hearing panel to Claire, the complainant. Liz, would you like to ask your question first?
Yes, thank you. Claire, I'm curious if you have experienced memory loss previously during episodes of drinking or when you were partying on previous occasions.
Not that I can recall. I think that's what was kind of scary about this night in particular, was waking up in the morning and having just this big gap of not knowing what happened, and that's never really happened to me before that I can recall. So that's one reason it was just really concerning.
Okay, thank you.
And Claire, I have a few more questions from the panel. First, you mentioned that you were feeling sick on the night of the incident. Do you remember talking with Mike about how you did not feel well, or did he ask how you were feeling at any point in the night?
I kind of remember talking with Mike during the night, like I kind of just fuzzy memories of having a conversation, but I can't really recall like specifically what we were talking about or if he was asking me any questions. I mean, I know I sat down on the couch at one point because I didn't feel well, but I don't really remember like at what point during the night I would have been talking to him or what exactly we would have talked about. I don't really have any memories of our specific conversations.
Okay. You mentioned in the investigative report that you thought others could probably tell that you were sick or didn't feel well. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think I just like, I remember kind of standing around and talking with people, but I don't remember what we were talking about. And I think that's like would be not typical for me, at least of like how I was acting. And just like leaving. I know at one point I went to sat down on the couch. That's probably not something I would have usually done either. Like going off to sit down by myself when I wasn't feeling very well. I'm usually pretty social at parties. So I think that that in itself like would have been a sign to somebody that I wasn't feeling like myself, or at least acting like I normally would during a party. But a lot of what happened after playing beer pong, I don't really have clear memories of, but I just think that would have been abnormal.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us about your previous sexual interactions with Mike and what you typically would say during those moments? Like, how verbal would you and Mike be typically when you had consensual sex before?
So, and I this is in the report, I told the investigator this during our conversations. I describe our relationship as friends with benefits, I guess. I mean, I think that's how most people would probably think of that relationship. And we had hooked up before, even when I'd been drinking. So like that in itself, I guess, is not abnormal. But in terms of it's hard in some ways to like just describe. I mean, typically I would talk and say things to Mike as we were engaging in sexual activity before. I mean, I would, give like verbal indications that I was enjoying what was happening, or sometimes, he would ask things like if it was okay to remove my shirt or my bra. So, I mean, there were times before when we would have those kinds of conversations. I can't really say like what conversations we would have had the night of this incident because I don't have any memories, but that is something that we would have talked about, or things that would have happened before that I do remember from previous encounters.
So on this particular night, you don't remember saying anything during sexual activity?
I don't recall the sexual activity itself really, except for that kind of brief moment that I told the investigator about. Remember him touching my breasts. And even during that moment, I don't remember saying anything or him saying anything to me. And I can't really speak to whether we had any kind of other conversation because I don't remember any other details.
Okay. Before the sexual activities, so at the party or any other time that day, I guess, had Mike asked if you wanted to have sex that night, or at any point did he ask if you were interested in that?
I don't remember that happening that night, but also that's not something we normally would have talked about. I mean, we didn't really make plans before or have conversations. Even in other nights where things happen consensually, I mean, they just, I guess, kind of naturally progressed. I don't ever remember us really having specific conversations about like what we were going to do or whether we were going to have sex. But I don't recall that happening that night either.
Okay, thank you. Last question, I believe, at this time. In a situation where you are incapacitated or too intoxicated to consent, whether it's you, another person, what would that look like to someone else? So someone too intoxicated or incapacitated to consent, how would you know that that was the case?
Are like specific to me or just like in general?
It could be your assessment of yourself or just a person in your situation. What could others see?
I think that, there are things that I don't remember happening, but that other people have told me about that I think would, at least on the night of this incident, that would have, I think somebody should have at least like questioned whether I was incapacitated. Like for example, the respondent told me that I had like spilled beer on myself during the party. That's something that I don't remember and something that would be totally unusual for me. I mean, I'll be honest that I like to have a good time with my friends and I do like to drink, but I don't often get drunk enough where I'm sloppy and would be spilling a beer on myself. I mean, I don't even remember drinking the beer that night, much less spilling it on me. So I think something like that, any kind of other like trouble with physical movement, it's like stumbling, I think is something that would be kind of out of the ordinary for me, or even in other situations that I think somebody should kind of question if a person is in a situation where they can consent. So that's just two things that I can think of kind of specific to this night, but also just in general.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the panel at this point, Liz or Lisa? Okay.
I believe Lisa had a question.
Okay. Lisa, go ahead and ask Claire your question.
Okay, my question is, Claire, can you please define for us your definition of friends with benefits?
That's a good question, I guess. We weren't like in a defined relationship. I mean, in terms of like being partners. I mean, we were friends and would hang out and do things with like other groups of friends, like hang out at Mike's house or go to karaoke. So like we did things in a friend group, but also had, engaged in sexual activity with each other, but there was no kind of like defined relationship. Like we could have seen other people if we wanted. I guess that's how I would define that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And my apologies for what I believe was audible to everyone. A ding. Oh, there's another one. A friendly reminder. We're about to take a break in a few moments, but a friendly reminder to be sure that all of your alerts are silenced so that we can avoid those distractions going forward. And my apologies. I believe that was on my computer. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have from the panel right now. Next on the list would be questions from the investigator. Amanda, do you have any questions for Claire?
No, I do not.
Okay. So now we will take that break to allow the respondent time to talk with his advisor and submit questions for Claire, and then we will return after the panel has an opportunity to review the questions. Right now, the time is 10:55 a.m. and we are off the record. We are back on the record with the recording running as of 10:58 a.m. The panel has reviewed questions from Mike for Claire, and I will ask those at this time. Claire, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. First question from Mike. Besides your comment about feeling sick, did you communicate to anyone at the party that you felt overly intoxicated?
I don't even remember telling Mike that I felt sick, but that's, I guess, something that Mike recalls happening. I remember sitting down on the couch and feeling sick, but I don't really remember talking to anybody at the party about feeling that way. But again, my memories are all pretty fuzzy. But I don't recall anything specific.
Okay. Second question, how much alcohol would you consume on a typical night where you became intoxicated? So on an evening before this incident?
First of all, wouldn't say that I like consumed a much larger amount of alcohol this evening than normally, but I didn't really eat a lot that day. Like I ate breakfast and a salad, and then didn't really have any dinner. So I think that had a lot to do with like feeling the effects of this. But then it wasn't really like, I guess I would say much more than I normally would consume. But then I also consumed alcohol that I don't remember drinking, like a beer. Apparently I had a beer after, I guess after playing beer pong or while playing. The timeline of that is kind of unclear to me, but it doesn't really seem like a lot more than I would normally have, but I think it affected me a lot more because I didn't really have a lot to eat before the party.
Okay. In prior sexual encounters, have you consented to sex with the respondent in situations where you have been intoxicated to the point of slurring your words or needing assistance with walking?
Can I take a break to talk with my advisor?
Sure, yes, we can take a break. At this point, if we want to stop the recording, it is 11:01 a.m. and just we'll maybe start with a 5-minute break, but we'll check in to make sure you're ready after 5 minutes.
Thank you.
All right, we are back from a short break. It is 11:02, and I'll go ahead and repeat the question from Mike, Claire. In prior sexual encounters, have you consented to sex with the respondent in situations where you have been intoxicated to the point of slurring your words or needing assistance to walk?
There has been alcohol involved in our other prior sexual activity. Like that's not unusual, and not, I guess I would say not even unusual that I would have drank like a significant amount. It's possible, I guess I could have been like slurring my speech. I can't really remember specifically. I think this is probably in relation to a reported encounter we had over spring break, which, I mean, we were drinking, but I remember the details of that incident on spring break. It's not like what happened during the incident here, where I don't recall details of what happened or even basic things like how I got upstairs to Mike's room. Like that's the real difference to me between those encounters.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Mike. Have you ever had a sexual encounter with the respondent during which you were not intoxicated or had not consumed alcohol?
Usually we had been drinking. I mean, I can't remember specific incidents where we hadn't at least had a drink or consumed some kind of alcohol. Yeah, I mean, I can't recall any other times where we at least hadn't had something to drink.
Okay. During prior sexual encounters with the respondent, were you on top of him during intercourse?
I mean, I don't remember really specific details about positions during prior sexual encounters. Again, I guess that's possible. I don't keep like a running log of what we did previously, but I mean, that's possible. We did that.
Okay. During a prior sexual encounters with a respondent, would you discuss having sex or planning to have sex prior to being in one another's presence?
I think I kind of mentioned this earlier. I mean, we didn't typically like have conversations when we got together about like what our expectations were for the night. I mean, we usually were just hanging out, having a few drinks, and then things just kind of progressed. I mean, it's not like we had conversations ahead of time, like planning that we were going to have sex whenever we did.
Okay. Couple of more questions. During prior sexual encounters with the respondent, was consent always given verbally, or did intercourse occur as a progression of a sexual situation without stopping to give verbal consent?
I also kind of addressed this. I know that there were times where like Mike would specifically ask about things like if he could take my shirt off. But it wasn't always necessarily that there was verbal consent before everything happened. I mean, that's just not realistic for how those incidents occurred. But I do know that there were some times where he would ask and there was verbal consent for specific things, but not everything, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Last question from Mike. When you met Mike on May 2nd, 2021 at the cafe, was he forthcoming in sharing events and information about what occurred the previous evening?
He was. Mike told me things that happened at the party that I didn't even know about or knew that had happened. Like, that's how I found out that I spilled my beer. He told me what had happened the night before, things that I didn't know. And that's the reason I think that Mike met with me, because I had texted him and asked what happened the night before. So, he shared with me what happened. It kind of filled in some gaps for me from things I didn't remember.
Okay. Those are all the questions that we have from the respondent.
I have a question. Can we ask, can the respondent ask follow-up questions?
So a quick reminder that the parties will need to ask questions and speak up on their own behalf. Mindy, so Mike, do you two want to take a break? And I'm directing the question at Mike. Do you want to take a break to discuss with your advisor any follow-up questions that you may have?
Could we please have a break to discuss follow-up questions?
Okay. All right. We will have a brief recess. It is 11:08, and please stop the recording. We are back at 11:13. Mike, I know you had an opportunity to speak with your advisor. Do you have any follow-up questions or questions for the panel at this time?
I have follow-up questions for the complainant, and I have sent them to you via email.
Okay. All right. Let's take another short recess. I will get to those questions and talk with my fellow panelists and then be back shortly after we have a chance to review those. It is 11:14. Okay, we are back again at 11:15, and we have two follow-up questions for you, Claire. First, were all previous sexual encounters with the respondent consensual?
Other than, yes, everything prior to this night was consensual.
Okay. Second question from Mike. It says, as you stated, is it correct that in the prior consensual sexual interactions that you had, that you don't have specific memories of the details of the sexual activity, such as positions during sex?
I guess I will just clarify that I remember having sex, and I know we would have changed positions during prior encounters, but I can't necessarily sit and tell you exactly in what order I may have been in what position. I remember having sex. I would have known, yes, we've had sex in different positions, but I couldn't give you it's not like a play-by-play of what happened.
Okay. Okay. Any further questions from the respondent? Mike?
Yes. Could we ask one re-clarifying question, if not a follow-up?
We will pause. And can you also email me that question? Give us a quick moment to look over it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we will stop the recording at 11:17. Okay, we are back on the record at 11:20. And I do want to make everyone aware for the record that we have reviewed an additional follow-up question from the respondent and have determined as a panel that it has already been answered by the complainant. So there are no additional questions for us to ask Claire at this time. Okay, so next step would be the respondent's statement. We will take a break, give him a moment to make sure that he's ready. And then we will reconvene, and it'll be a similar order as it was for Claire, statement and followed by questions. So we will be back momentarily. It is 11:21. Good afternoon. We are back on the record at 1:45. We can go ahead and start the recording, Amanda. The next segment of the hearing will be the respondent's statement and questions. Before the break, we heard from the complainant, and now we are shifting gears to the respondent. Mike will be given an opportunity to make a statement. Then the hearing panel and investigator can ask questions, if any, followed by written questions from the complainant that I will ask after consulting with my fellow panelists. There will be a break after we ask our questions from the panel so that the complainant can get that list of questions ready with her advisor. Are there any questions before we proceed? Okay, not seeing any. Mike, we are ready for your statement if you would like to make one.
Yes, thank you. First, I want to thank the panel for their time and consideration of this matter. And secondly, I would like to just state that I deny all the allegations which have been made against me. I believe that at the conclusion of this hearing, the evidence, which has already been presented and will be presented on my side as well, will show that there was no indication that the complainant was incapacitated. There's nothing I could have done or should have known that would have indicated as much. I have been nothing but forthright, both with the complainant answering her questions directly to me and during my participation in this investigation. I'm glad to answer any questions you have and clear up any confusion or discrepancies which you see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next up will be questions from the panel. And I know we have compiled a few during the break earlier. Liz, if you would like to start with questions first. Are you ready, Mike?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead, Liz.
Okay, Mike. Did you ask Claire how she was feeling before engaging in sexual activity on the night of the incident, after she had told you she wasn't feeling well?
No. So that, if I remember correctly, the instance what you're speaking about is the incident in which she was on the couch, indicated she wasn't feeling well. I asked if she needed anything. She let me know that she didn't need anything. Sometime later is when she then approached me in the kitchen. As I've stated in the report, she approached me, initiated physical contact with me, led me upstairs, began removing her own clothing. There really wasn't any conversation. I don't remember exchanging any words at all, actually. I think it all flowed physically only from there as opposed to verbally. So no, there was no follow-up question as to how she was feeling. It was just the prior incident when she was on the couch.
So you didn't inquire what the cause was, why she wasn't feeling well, or did you have a sense as to what the cause was?
No, I mean, I'd been around the complainant when she had been drinking previous to this. I know that, when she consumes alcohol, she, either gets very drunk and is fine, or, when she's kind of just conducting herself around a party, she may sit down. I think she said it was strange, but I don't think it's strange to sit down at a party. But, I did approach her and I said, "Hey, how are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm not feeling that well." And I said, "Something I can do?" She said, "No, I can't remember exactly what she said, but she indicated she didn't need anything from me, at which point I left. And it was sometime later. It wasn't that she came into the kitchen right after that comment, but she was back up, had a drink, was continuing to initiate conversation with me as well as other people at the party. So quite simply, the question didn't at that point feel relevant. She it seemed from all intents and purposes on my end, moved past whatever she was feeling. She was back to drinking. She was back to communicating and being up and around, as opposed to seated as she was when I saw her.
So her stating that she didn't feel well wasn't a cause for concern for you?
No, not at the time that we went upstairs. I mean, it wasn't really a cause for concern when she said it too, because it wasn't, oh, I'm going to throw up. She kind of said, I feel a little sick, and that can certainly happen. Maybe you when you're consuming alcohol, feel dizzy, or just want to sit down for a second. But it wasn't something where I thought that she was down and out or anything like that. Like I said, the next time I saw her, she was back consuming alcohol. So she made the determination herself, even, that she was feeling better. In my opinion, as to what I was seeing from her.
Okay. I do have another question. You mentioned that there have been times in the past when you both initiated sex, but you have done so more than she had. In the past, when she initiated it, how did she do so?
I would say it looked different every time. I guess I could compare it to when I would initiate it. It looked very similar. It was similar, in fact, to the night in question here, that we had no discussions prior, but one of us initiated physical contact. In this case, it was the complainant kissing me in the kitchen. It's been the same on my end in the past, where I would initiate, I'd put my arm around her or something like that. And then it was just kind of a physical signal, I apologize, as opposed to a verbal, hey, do you want to go do this? It was kind of a progression from there. That's how I would describe previous incidents, just as being very similar to what took place in the kitchen at my apartment that night.
Would you say it was characteristic for her to initiate contact in that way when there's others around, or was that uncharacteristic?
Yeah, certainly. I think, as referenced in the investigative report, though maybe not spelled out so clearly, we were around a group of friends when we left to then go to bed together and ended up having sex. It was something where, it wasn't that we were afraid to publicly display affection. It wasn't something that always happened. Sometimes it was that we'd be in a side room and, that would happen. But if it was in the middle of the party, or if it was, for example, during spring break, if it was at the pool or the hot tub, then that's where it started. That's just kind of where it started. It wasn't something that was atypical.
Thank you.
Lisa, do you want to ask any questions you have next?
Yes, thank you. I do have a couple of questions. And can you please explain or give us your definition of the meaning of the words friends with benefits?
Sure. So, I think the way it applies generally is also the way it applied to the complainant and I, that we were casual acquaintances. We knew each other from some classes as well as a club on campus. And while we didn't have a set relationship as such, where we would communicate every day or go on dates, go to dinner together, we did occasionally engage in sex. That was only, I think, 3 or 4 times that it happened over the course of a number of months since we knew one another. But it was just that, whenever we kind of got together and had that feeling, and there were times when we hung out and didn't have sex as well, but it was just, this could happen. It was always, the opportunity that we might have sex, but never an expectation that we would go home together, never an expectation that we'd see each other the next day. We would communicate on Snapchat, mostly just, flirting back and forth. But I guess I would define it as being short of a dating relationship and more than just, flirting, because obviously there's physical interaction as well.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is, when you all were involved with sexual intercourse, did she say anything at that time?
So I guess I would ask, as a clarification, do you mean on the night of May 1st or in general when we would have sex together?
On the night of May 1st.
No, I don't remember any verbal communication. We kind of, in my estimation, knew how it looked between us. So there wasn't really much to say. For example, I think the first couple times that we had sex, I may have asked her, do you want me to wear a condom? And she would say yes. At this point, I knew that was her preference. So there wasn't a question about that. There wasn't, do you want to go upstairs? It was kind of just, again, her leading me. And, honestly letting the physicality of it do the talking. Like I said, when we were in the report, when we were outside of my room, she was touching my chest. In my room, she began kissing me. There really wasn't a pause at any point once she kind of stopped and kissed me in the kitchen and led me upstairs. So no, there wasn't any discussion, or I don't remember any words during either, which at times in prior instances there would be comments, but not in this instance as I remember it. I think it was, I don't remember any conversation during or before sex.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, I have just a few more that we haven't touched on already. With some of the other questions, you were referencing kind of the moments leading up to the sexual activity on this particular night, May 1st to the 2nd. Can you talk about the actual sexual activity in terms of, in the investigative report, you talked about how it was the same as previous times or similar to previous interactions that you had. Tell us, what were those specific points of similarity in terms of the actual sexual activity on this night versus previous nights?
Sure. So one, I guess I would say that what I think I was referring to and what I think you were referencing from the report, in that it looked the same as previous nights, was in response to the complainant's question about what happened last night. And I made a comment, what usually happens when we get together, which just meant that we ended up having sex, alcohol was involved, kind of just like I said, that set expectation that we had kind of formed between ourselves over the period of months that we've been having sex. As far as the way that sex progressed, we were in my room. She started by taking off her own shirt, followed by lifting slightly at mine, to which to me, indicated that she wanted me to take off my shirt, which I did. I did that myself after she lifted it. I helped her take off her pants as she kind of laid back onto my bed, and then I took off my own pants. As it states in the report, I was on top of her when everything began, because I had leaned over to grab the condom from my nightstand, which was, I think it was to my right as I was facing toward the top of my bed. And from there, I put the condom on, and we may have, continued kissing briefly, but I think fairly quickly after I put the condom on, I inserted my penis into her vagina. That was probably a few minutes of me on top. And then I know for a fact that it then transitioned to her being on top of me. I think that lasted another few minutes. And in the end, it ended up that I was back on top of her when I ejaculated, as is, in the report, I did ejaculate, at which point I went to the bathroom. The complainant had already rolled over. Like I said, there wasn't any communication during sex, and I was in the bathroom for some time afterward. And when I came out, she was asleep, and that wasn't abnormal either. She had spent the night at my place before, on nights that we'd had sex. So I just kind of went to sleep as well. And when I woke up, she was gone, and I got those text messages.
Okay. So one of the things I was referring to was, and I can direct your attention to page 14 of the investigative report. And at that point, it says, in response to his statements about prior sexual activity, I asked whether alcohol had been involved previously. Stein responded, yeah, alcohol is usually involved. We're both usually drunk. I remember over spring break, we were both so drunk that we had to lean on each other when we were walking. We had sex then, and it felt the same as this time. This is the first time she hasn't remembered, though. That's still so weird because it seemed like she was into it. So that phrase of we had sex then and it felt the same as this time. So you were referring to previous sexual encounters, as in your mind, there was nothing that distinguished this time. Are there any other specific points that you didn't just outline that were the same, things that told you that you knew this was the same?
So as far as things that told me this was the same were, one, it wasn't strange that alcohol was involved. Alcohol was always involved when we had sex. It was the same that there wasn't verbal communication about, do you want to go have sex? It was kind of just a progressive event that started with her initiating physical contact. It was the same in that we used a condom. And I would say also, not abnormal that I didn't, ask the question, but just assume that that's what she wanted because that's what we'd done before. It was the same in the sense of our progression during sex that we are in multiple positions. It's sometimes I'm on top, sometimes she's on top, or side kind of things like that. But I would say, I guess I don't know what else there would be as far as letting you know about things being the same as they were before. That I was getting the same kind of not word cues, but sound cues, just the noises that I was hearing. Like I said, that's what I think I meant by seeming like she was into it, in the sense of she was making noises that I had heard before during our consensual sexual encounters. I took that as an indication that she was enjoying herself. That's what I meant there. And all of that was, on par with our past experiences, which is why I had no indication that this was any different before or during the intercourse.
Okay, thank you. Another question I had, when you have been around Claire when she has been intoxicated before, how can you tell that she's intoxicated? What are those signs?
So I think on a few of those instances, I've seen the number of drinks she's consumed. For example, in Florida, we were, with the same groups, we were together all day. On that incident, it was visibly clear that she was drunk. One, I think, as was stated by my roommate Joe, that we had to support each other walking up to our room, my room. When we did end up having sex, she was slurring her words. That's when, I think it's clear that anyone is intoxicated when those things are going on, when someone's having trouble walking or speaking. Typically, though, I think she gets a little more handsy in situations where she's even just been drinking a little bit and is getting towards drunk, tipsy or drunk. That was the case here. She came to the kitchen and was kind of, as I said, she, fell into me a little bit. We kind of laughed that off. She'd spilled her drink, but that was another indication that she was drunk, but not anything beyond what had, been observed before between the two of us. I certainly think that, she's a bit more affable. She's more friendly, wants to, talk to people, as was the case in the kitchen with the conversation between her friend, I think, Nikki, and I. But yeah, her typical signs are just, being a little bit more touchy, laughing, and really, honestly, trying to initiate sexual intercourse or sexual activity as well. Because, all I've ever seen of that is when we're, both drinking, and often Claire was drunk during those incidents. So that's another indicator to me that she might be intoxicated to some level. I think that's all I can really say as far as, it hasn't been that I see her every weekend. It's been, 3 or 4 times that we've been around each other, and this has also happened. So I don't know how she would describe her physical symptoms, but what I've noticed is that she just gets a little more touchy.
Thank you. Kind of going off of that a bit, would you say that you had any concern, or did it give you pause at all that on this particular night, you have stated that you were fully aware of what was going on, that you were not as intoxicated as she was, or something to that effect? In the investigative report, you referenced that you had been drinking but were not heavily intoxicated. Did it give you pause that she, stumbled, seemed to be kind of showing more outward signs of intoxication than you were at the time of sexual activity?
No, because like I said, those are also signs that I've seen on nights that we had consensual sex. Had that been, the first time I met her, I might have said, whoa, maybe, slow down, or one, like, this random person's falling into you or spilling their drink. But just from the context that we built up in our relationship, it was clear to me that, this is a state that she often finds herself in when she's still in control of a situation, let alone, not able to remember anything. I would say that I've seen Claire more intoxicated and been in situations with her where she has consented to sex and remembers everything. So that's the biggest difficulty here, is that every sign I was getting was that she was, certainly not more drunk than usual, yet there was this, reported memory loss associated with her drinking tonight. And I wasn't concerned about my level of intoxication, just because, like I said, we built that context between ourselves. I certainly wasn't as drunk as I would have been back on spring break in Florida. I consumed a few drinks, but it's accurate to say that I wasn't intoxicated. But I also didn't feel like I was taking advantage of her, so I didn't have any concern there. This is something that we'd done before and had both been comfortable with, and I thought that was the same situation we found ourselves in on the night of May 1st.
How many of the drinks on the night of May 1st that the complainant had, how many of those did you observe?
Oh, I would say I saw her drinking when they were playing beer pong, though I don't know what she was drinking. I saw she had a red Solo cup. I didn't ever see her refill a drink or anything like that. And then that was before I saw her on the couch. And then after I saw her on the couch, sometime later in the kitchen, she had a bottle of beer, a Corona, the same that I was drinking. So I would say I only saw her hold 2 drinks. I have no idea what she may have consumed, outside of my view or prior to getting to my apartment. But I only saw her with the 1 red Solo cup playing beer pong and the Corona when she met up with me in the kitchen.
Did you ask her how much she had had to drink that night?
No, I don't believe I did. Like I said, I saw her drinking the 1 drink, and I saw her drinking the 2nd drink, and none of that pointed toward anything that would need to have a check-in. We hadn't checked in with each other on prior incidents. For example, in Florida, it wasn't, there was no conversation of, hey, are you too drunk? It was just, something that we did consensually and progressively. On this instance, one, getting fewer signs of outward intoxication than in previous incidents, and seeing her, firsthand consume less alcohol than in previous incidents, I didn't feel like a check-in was, not unwarranted, but certainly not something where I needed to make sure that she, was with it. And like I said, she was communicating perfectly. She had the brief moment where she stumbled into me a little bit, and I kind of caught her, and then we laughed about it. She spilled her beer, but she wasn't slurring her words. She didn't need any assistance walking. We went to my room. Certainly, if there had been something where, she wasn't communicating properly, or she fell into a wall as we went, then I would have stopped, certainly, and said, hey, are you okay? Like, do you want to sit down? But I didn't get any of those signs. I just saw a person who had had a few drinks, but was, in my opinion, totally in control of both themselves and their actions.
So to clarify, you observed her spill the drink, obviously felt her fall into you at one point, and
Yes.
you were aware that she was not feeling well. But those things didn't lead you to make sure that she was okay before sexual activity.
No, I didn't ask. Like I said, there was a period of time between her letting me know she didn't feel very well and her coming back into the kitchen in like I said, with the drink in her hand, in an improved mood. She did fall into me, but like I said, that wasn't atypical either for her consuming alcohol on nights when we had sex. No, I mean, I did not ask her how she was feeling at that time.
On previous occasions, did you have sex with her within an hour or 2 of her indicating that she didn't feel well and had to lay or sit down on a surface like the couch?
Not to my recollection. In Florida, even with the more outward signs of intoxication, there wasn't, I guess, the verbal communication that she didn't feel well. It was clear that she was intoxicated, but she didn't make a comment to me. So I guess no, there wasn't a situation where she expressed that and then we had sex.
Okay. Thank you. I think those are the questions that I had. Did either Liz or Lisa have any additional questions? Okay.
Excuse me, can I take a minute break to confer with the complainant?
Let me check with the complainant to speak directly to the panel herself. Claire, do you need a break or have any questions at this time?
Yes, I'd like to consult with my advisor.
Okay. Okay, we can take a recess. It is now 2:09, and it's a good point actually to take a break. Give you all some time, Claire and your advisor, to get questions ready for the respondent. That will be the next thing on our list. So we can go ahead and stop the recording for now. Thank you. We are back at 2:14. Next on the list would be questions from the investigator. In this case, Amanda, do you have any questions for Mike, the respondent?
No, I do not.
Okay. We received a list of questions from the complainant and her advisor to ask at this time. The panel has reviewed them and is prepared to ask several questions. Whenever you are ready, Mike, are you ready for some questions?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. First question from Claire. Have you ever witnessed her spill a drink at any other times you've hung out and then engaged in sexual activity?
I'm not sure. It's certainly possible on prior occasions, but I haven't seen it as such.
You have not seen her spill a drink?
No, I've not seen her spill a drink. I can't say that I've seen her spill a drink.
Okay. Second question, you told the investigator that Claire would, quote, maybe sometimes say something when you previously engaged in sexual activity. Can you elaborate on or remember what kinds of things Claire would have said during prior sexual activity?
It would have been comments to do with the sex we were having. Comments about what I should do with my body or things of that nature. Whether it was, giving instructions or saying yes, things like that. That wasn't every time, or it wasn't something where there were always these, like I said, outward verbal expressions. Sometimes it was just noises, as it was on this occasion, but that's what it would have been in the past.
Okay. Did it seem unusual to you that Claire didn't say anything to you during the sexual activity on this night?
No, like I said, that, that's something that's happened before, where it's just the noises being made as opposed to comments being made. So that was not abnormal to me.
Next question from Claire. You told the investigator that Claire had, quote, stumbled a bit and fell into you in the kitchen and you caught her. Did you notice any other stumbling?
No, I can't say I don't remember seeing any other stumbling from Claire. It was just the one incident in which she met up with me in the kitchen.
Did Claire require any assistance going up the stairs to your bedroom?
Not that I recall. She was leading me, so.
Were you, when you say lead, I have a follow-up question real quick on that. When you say leading, did she have your hand or what did that look like?
Yeah, she took my hand in the kitchen and walked out of the kitchen and was in front of me the entire way to my bedroom door, which included going up the stairs.
Still holding your hand?
Yes, still holding my hand. She may have used the handrail, but no, there was no assistance from me or anything other than the handrail going up the steps, and we were still holding hands.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. There are two more questions. Did you and Claire have any conversation after the sexual activity ended and before you went to the bathroom?
No, like I said, there was no verbal communication whatsoever during or after the sexual intercourse, which I would also say wasn't atypical. I usually get up right away and go to the bathroom to remove the condom. Like I said, on this occasion, I was in the bathroom for, I think, 15 minutes afterward as well. And when I returned to the bed, she was already asleep, which I said, wasn't an issue. She'd slept there before. I figured she was sleeping there again that night. So there was no conversation afterward, no.
Okay, so I have a quick follow-up question on that, just for clarification. You said no verbal communication whatsoever, so, and then she was sleeping when you came out of the bathroom. So would you say that you didn't hear any verbal communication, comments, words from the complainant? Was the last thing you heard her say that day in the kitchen? And then
Yes,
you
the
didn't hear her
last-
speak again?
The last words she said to me were in the kitchen before she led me upstairs. And from there was no more conversation.
Okay. So the last thing she said to you is in the kitchen. After that, went upstairs, had sex for several minutes, as you've stated. You were in the bathroom and you didn't hear anything else from her during that entire time?
That's correct, yeah.
I think he's answered that question.
As another reminder, parties' advisors can't speak directly, but if there are any questions or concerns, or if you need a break to talk with your advisee, you can do that. Mike, do you need a break, or do you have any concerns or questions at this time?
I don't need a break. I would just say that I feel I've answered whether or not there was communication. So I'll
Okay.
let that as your stand.
Okay, thank you. I think there's one more question from Claire. And it goes back to her staying overnight at your house. So she said, you stated that the complainant had spent the night at your house on prior occasions. The prior times the complainant stayed overnight, did you have any discussion about her staying at the time that decision was made?
Certainly the first time, because it was the first time she asked if it was okay. The second time, I think it was again after sex, and it was just kind of understood that she would stay there. And then there was, of course, the next time that we had sex at my place was this occasion. So when she slept there, it wasn't abnormal, and there was no conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Claire, at this point, do you have any additional follow-up questions for the respondent?
I do not.
Next would be probably a break so that we can bring in the witness who is here to join us today, Nikki McKnight. We will bring her in after a short recess. The time is 2:22. We can stop the recording. We are ready to resume the hearing. It is now 2:34. And we have witness Nikki McKnight here with us. Nikki, can you see and hear clearly at this point?
I can see and hear clearly.
Okay, great. Thank you. If at any point you can't, do let me know. At this stage in the hearing, we will open up the floor for any additional statements from Nikki and then do questions just like we have with each of the parties. So Nikki, just so you know, we have all reviewed your statement in the investigative report that you also had a chance to review. Do you have anything to add to that statement now? Anything in addition to what's already there?
No, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. First up, after that would be questions from the hearing panel. Liz or Lisa, do either of you have a question for this witness?
Sure, I do. Thanks for being here, Nikki. I have a question about your time with Claire before you got to Mike's house. I believe you said that you had had some drinks together. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. While you were there at your apartment before you went to Mike's, did you or Nikki have any snacks? Tell me a little about what that felt like.
I don't remember if we really had any snacks. We were at my apartment, before we left. We left my apartment around 25, 30 minutes before 10 o'clock, I think. But when we had some shots of vodka, I think we each had 3. But I don't really remember if we had anything to eat. It was so far passing us our dinner time that I just don't remember.
Okay, thank you.
A quick follow-up on that, Nikki. Did you observe Claire eating anything else that day, or kind of earlier in the day? Were you aware of what she had to eat? Excuse me.
I'm not really aware. I think, Claire said she got a bite to eat, but she didn't talk about having like a big meal or starving either way.
Okay. And you just mentioned 3 shots of vodka at your place before going to Mike's. Was that all you had to drink before leaving?
Yeah, we only had 3 shots. We were just pre-gaming ahead of going to the party.
And over what period of time would you say you had those shots?
It was actually a short period of time, maybe 15, 30 minutes.
Okay. And remind us, those were in traditional size shot glasses, or what was the glass?
They were just your typical shot glass, little glass ones.
Would you say that was more or less than you would typically drink with Claire before going out?
I think it was about typical. I mean, sometimes we didn't drink at all. Sometimes, it just depends where we're going, what we felt like doing.
Okay. Did Claire mention anything to you about what her plans were that evening? What she planned to do at Mike's specifically, or if she had planned to stay or had, intentions to have sex with him that night? Any conversation about that?
We didn't have a lot of discussion. I told her that, I didn't want to stay too late and I was going to leave, sometime around midnight, unless I felt otherwise. And when we talked about that, she didn't really tell me that she was going to leave when I did. But it's not unusual for her to spend the night, over there. Sometimes she would do that.
Okay. Lisa, do you have any questions for the witness? Okay. Seeing none from Lisa. Liz, did you have any other follow-ups?
I don't think so. I'm going back to the investigative report and reviewing it, but I don't think so.
Okay. If anything comes to mind, let me know. I would like to remind everyone that before the parties, previously, the parties have agreed in line with policy to directly question this witness. So we're going to have first the complainant and then the respondent ask any questions of this witness that they have. And you can speak directly to the witness. Does anybody have any new thoughts or concerns about that before we proceed? Seeing none. Claire, you would be up first. Do you have any questions for Nikki?
I don't think that I have any questions for Nikki.
Okay. Mike, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Nikki, did you at any point in the night check in with the complainant regarding her level of intoxication?
No, we never had a conversation like, how are you feeling? Maybe did you have like drank too much? We just having fun.
Based on her actions at the party, did you see any need to check in with her about her level of intoxication?
No, I mean, when I was around her, she seemed fine. She was drunk, but we've hung out a lot together when we've both been drunk, and she wasn't slurring her words or acting in a way where I thought, maybe she needed to be watched over or taken home.
So, to that point, did you have any concern leaving the complainant at the party based on how she was presenting?
No, well, when I left, I didn't see her. I hadn't seen her for a little while. She got up and gone to the bathroom and sort of disappeared. And eventually, when I was getting ready to leave, I tried to send her a message on Snapchat, and she never responded. But I didn't think that was a big deal. I just went on home.
Would you have left her there alone at the party if you felt she was in a state where she couldn't make decisions for herself?
No, and I feel bad about what happened.
Those are all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Any other questions for Nikki? Liz, you look.
I might like to consult briefly with the other members of the hearing panel.
Okay, sure. We will take a quick break and send folks to the separate break rooms. It is 2:42, and let's stop the recording for a moment. We are back at 2:44 after a brief break for the panel to discuss, and we have one additional question for this witness. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you. Nikki, I'm curious how much you had to drink throughout the day and the evening.
Well, like I mentioned, we each had 3 shots of vodka at my place before we took the Uber over to the party. At the party, I drank beer. We played beer pong, and we did not do well. So we both did a lot of drinking during the game, but it was hard to say how much beer I had because it was, I was just drinking from cups, not from like one bottle or one can. But it could have been the equivalent of 4 or 5 additional beers.
Okay. How would you gauge your intoxication towards the end of the evening?
I was feeling drunk, not. I didn't feel like I was like super drunk because I remember, I recall everything from that evening pretty clearly. I don't remember, having any problems, typing out my message to Claire in Snapchat, and I didn't leave because I was feeling too tipsy. I just was ready to go home, so I just called back another Uber and left.
Okay, so you said you don't have there's not any gaps in your memory from the evening or anything like that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I didn't wake up like with a hangover or anything.
Okay, thank you.
And I also wanted to give the investigator Amanda a chance to ask any questions for this witness if you have them.
I don't have any questions for the witness.
Okay, I think that is all we have for Nikki then. Thank you very much for attending the hearing today and answering some questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
At 2:47, following the witness's testimony and answers to our questions, this brings us next to concluding remarks. We will now allow for each of the parties, in addition to the investigator, to make any concluding remarks. As a reminder, you are not required to make any sort of closing statement, but you certainly have the opportunity to do so. Before we begin, does anyone need a break or have any questions? Okay, seeing none. Investigator Amanda, do you have any concluding remarks to make at this time?
No, I don't have any concluding remarks.
Okay. Claire, as the complainant, do you have any closing remarks for us?
Yes, I do.
All right, you can go ahead.
Thank you. When telling me what happened on the night of this incident, the respondent said what happened is the same thing that always happened when we got together. But I would like again to state that this isn't true. The other times the respondent and I had sex after drinking, it was sex that I remembered. I didn't have to wake up and find a used condom in the trash to put things together. I didn't have to text the respondent to ask what happened. I knew. But this night in question, I have few memories. And there were things I didn't even know about until later when the respondent told me. I had no clue I had spilled beer on my shirt. The respondent told the investigator that I stumbled a bit and fell into him, and that I had told him during the night I didn't feel well. These are details I don't even recall. I don't remember how I got upstairs, and the brief memory I do have of the night was wanting to push the respondent away, but not being able to do so. During the hearing today, the respondent also stated there had been no conversation between the two of us from the time we left the kitchen until the next morning. And I'll admit we didn't always engage in a lot of verbal communication during sex, but I would say that it's abnormal for there to have been no communication between us at all for that length of time. I was too intoxicated to consent to sexual activity on the night of this incident. I want to close by thanking you all for your time and attention to this important matter today.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Mike, would you like to make any concluding remarks at this time?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to start by saying that I believe the complainant's version of the events. I believe she has no memory of the night in question. I am sorry that she finds herself in this position. And I can say that as she described me in the beginning of this hearing is how I would describe myself, a friend to her. I took no actions with any knowledge of her level of intoxication being past that which it had been previously on times when we engaged in consensual sex. The evening started, as it relates to the sexual intercourse, with physical initiation by the complainant, which had happened before. She led me to the place where we ended up having sex, which had happened before. She removed her own clothing, which had happened before. She positioned herself on top of me during sex, which had also happened in instances before. The first indication I got that anything was different about this interaction as compared to previous incidents in which we had sex was when she texted me the next morning. And when she did text me the next morning, I was immediately responsive. I met with her and gave her information which led to the filing of a formal complaint against me. I had nothing to hide because I didn't do anything wrong. I told her the truth as I saw it. And I don't know what else I can do on the standard of knew or should have known. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Now the close of the record. That concludes the hearing for today. The hearing panel will deliberate in private without anyone else present except for perhaps our legal advisor. We will determine whether Mike Stein is responsible for violating university policy. If so, we will determine sanctions. The hearing panel will reach a decision after deliberation and prepare a written report describing our finding, how each panelist voted, the information cited by the panel in support of its determination, and any information the panel excluded from its consideration. The parties will receive notification in writing of the panel's decision on responsibility and any decision on sanctions and remedial actions, typically within 10 business days. Both parties will have the right to appeal the findings. If you have any questions about the equity resolution process or this hearing, please contact Amanda, the investigator in this matter. I will ask the investigator to move everyone to their respective breakout rooms where you can speak in private off the record. You are free to remain in your breakout rooms to speak with your advisor, or you may leave at any time as the hearing has now concluded. I thank everyone for taking the time to be here today. The time is approximately 2:53 p.m. We are now off the record.